because obviously Israel's a very small country, and you get a population, a demographic that's even 600 to 1,000, it takes, people notice it. Now that is growing, especially because of the Russian Jewish people that have come to Israel. For 70 years under communism, all they were allowed to know is they were Jewish. They had no idea what that meant. So they were very interested, and you come and talk to them, and this is true anywhere in the world where you have Russian Jewish people. They're very, very interested and receptive when we tell them about Messiah. Now, unfortunately, we're into the next generation of those coming out from behind the Iron Curtain. And that next generation, they're not quite the same as that first generation coming out. So they'll tighten up, and their resistance will grow. But more and more and more, we are seeing a receptiveness, and so that number is growing so much that the government has actually taken notice of this group, which has its downside too, because then they decided, well, what are we going to do about this? We've got to stop it. And they thought to try to deport all of these people. They actually had a plan and had about 160 summons ready to send the Ministry of Immigration. Because to get citizenship, you've got to be Jewish. And that means on the form there's a question, are you Jewish? Yes, no. So the question they want to pose to you is, were you a believer when you checked that box and said, yes, you were Jewish? And because in their mind, I'm no longer Jewish. Because I'm a believer in Jesus. You can't follow Jesus and still be Jewish. So if you were a believer when you checked the box, they consider that to be a fraud. They'd strip you of your citizenship and deport you. If you say, no, I became a believer after I gained citizenship, then there's nothing they can do about it. So it has its ups and downs. Well, in Israel, it really plays out the same as in this country. In this country, when you're in Brooklyn, New York, or New York City, period, especially Brooklyn, though, it is the home to the largest Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox population in the world, more than in Jerusalem. So the closer you are to that epicenter, the more religious you are as a Jew. The further you move from that, like there may be Jewish people living in Idaho, they're not going to be Orthodox. The reason they would come to Idaho, they're distancing themselves from the Jewish community, so to speak. But it amazes me where I go in the country where you don't expect Jewish people, and there are Jewish people. They just don't observe the faith so much. So the further you get, the more true that is, and then the more secular you are as a Jew. Well, that's true in Israel. The closer you are to Jerusalem, the more religious you are. The further away, Tel Aviv is 45 miles away, and it's extremely secular. Where Jerusalem is extremely religious. So it just depends where you are, where you're going to find that. So it's always a smaller part of the population. Yes. Yeah, pretty much so. If they're not a religious Jew, then it would have no bearing on it. You remember, has it been 2 months already? When France came out and told the Jews, get out, we don't want you here. And Netanyahu stood up in worldwide plea. It's time for all the European Jews to come home. Not the religious ones, just all Jews to come home. That's why the modern state of Israel exists, from the guilt of the Holocaust. that there'd be a homeland for the Jewish people to protect from ever, ever allowing that to happen again. And so because of this anti-Semitism in Europe, it's time for them to all come home. And it wasn't empty rhetoric. The Knesset voted $48 million to make this happen. To transport them, to subsidize them for 6 months, housing, vocational training, if they need that, and they have to learn Hebrew. This is Israel. Our official language is Hebrew, and if you're going to be a citizen of Israel, you will learn our language. What a novel concept. You know, that ought to catch on around the world, don't you think? So it's, they don't want, when you when you call someone, if you want Hebrew, press 1. If you want Spanish, press 2. If you want Finnish, press 3. If you want German, press 5. They don't want that. Hebrew. That's our language. And so they give you 6 months, which I don't think is enough to learn Hebrew, but they give you 6 months and they subsidize you. So this is how serious they are about bringing the Jewish people home. Yeah. Yeah. Now you're going to hear all the other languages because they're coming from all over the world. And English, you're not going to have any problem. You go with me to Israel next year, you won't have any problem because they're speaking English. But they have to learn Hebrew. And I think that's good. What else? Yes. Actually, in Israel, they're considered Israelis. Um, but Jewish, you have both the faith and the ethnic identity, both under Jewish, under the term Jewish. But it didn't start out that way, but it's just been broad brushed. Because their families have been there forever. They grew up in Germany. They grew up in Russia. They grew up just like I'm an American Jew. I grew up in America. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. Yeah. They don't believe that Jesus is Messiah. So they don't believe Messiah has come yet. They don't believe the New Testament in any way, shape, or form. No more than any of you have any fondness for the Book of Mormon. Usually people don't get it when I say that. They say, well, how can they not believe it? Jesus? It's right there in the Bible. I have one guy arguing with me like this, and I said, where? And he said, in the Bible. I said, where? He said, in the New Testament. I said, right. I don't believe the New Testament any more than you believe in the Book of Mormon. And then the lights came out. It's kind of like God created Mormons so Christians can understand how Jewish people feel. And so they don't believe anything of the New Testament. And so they are looking still for Messiah to come. And they believe Messiah, when he comes, will be their king and remove them from the oppression of the world. But they don't believe he's God. Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one Lord. So if now Messiah is also God, we're building a pantheon of gods. It smacks of idolatry and paganism. Only one God. So Messiah is just a man that God will anoint to be their king. But in their mind, he's not God. So this is what they're waiting for and looking for. What else? The interesting thing is the Lubavitch, who are a sect of the ultra-Orthodox, the Hasidim, they actually believe And among the Hasidim, they don't believe, a large number of them don't believe Israel should exist at all today. No Israel without Messiah. When Messiah comes, he'll establish Israel and be our king. Therefore, when Ahmadinejad says, I'm going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, they go, fine. It shouldn't be here anyway. And prior to 1948, they fought vehemently against the establishment of the modern state of Israel for that reason. And so the Lubavitch believe their great rabbi, Rabbi Schneerson, is Messiah. Now, Rabbi Schneerson died in the early 90s, and they fully expect him to raise from the dead and take his place as their Messiah. Now, they can believe that about Rabbi Schneerson. What's so hard about believing that about Rabbi Jesus? I mean, he's already done this, hasn't he? And so, they're in the neighborhood. We just have to direct them a little bit more on their thinking. But that's the mindset on that. What else? Yes? You mean like the religious Jew or the secular Jew? A lot of people believe secular Jews are easier to witness to. I don't think that that's always true. I don't think that's a safe assumption. With a secular Jew, you almost have to teach him Judaism before you can teach him Messiah. At least with a religious Jew, he has understanding of his scripture, at least to a degree. So when you start pulling things out of Passover that foreshadow and are fulfilled by Jesus, when you start pulling things out of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which are things that Jesus fulfilled as Messiah, secular Jew kind of looks at you like he has no idea, really no connection there. It's his grandfather's faith, but not his type of thing. It's a little bit like, who's easier to witness to, a lost individual that goes to church, or a lost individual who's an atheist? I mean, with an atheist, you don't have a common basis of agreement at all, because everything we want to tell them is from the scriptures, and he doesn't believe the scriptures. He thinks that's just man-made and it's a fantasy, along with the God that the scriptures teach. So that guy's a lot tougher than the guy that goes to church but is lost, but he has some understanding of the things you're telling him. It's kind of that way. Good question. What? Yes. Well, I don't live in Israel. I live in Fort Worth, Texas. And you have more freedom reaching Jewish people here than there. But in answer to your question, since Saddam Hussein and his chemical warfare and the threats on that, and in Israel, pretty much you buy your apartments. You really aren't renting, even an apartment. But in every apartment, every home, you have to have a safe room. And that is a room that has been made to where you can go in there, close the door, and seal it up completely in case of threat of chemical warfare. So you've got that as a reality of life in Israel. Now, those are dens, those could be a bedroom, those are used every day without the thought that that's what that is designed for. It's not like it's weighing heavy on their minds. Running for a bomb shelter, unless you're living in the region down by Gaza, Sderot, Ashkelon, Ashdod, those Jewish settlements, that is a way of life for them, because they've been pummeled by missiles coming out of Gaza ever since George W. Bush forced us into giving it back to giving it over to the Palestinians. And so they live that way, but it's a way of life. When the most recent war in Gaza was going on 2 summers ago, or was it last summer? Last summer. And I kept telling everybody, don't get scared off from going on the trip with us, because it'll be over within a couple of months, because Hamas doesn't have the ability to fight an extended war. When that was going on in Jerusalem, they were concerned for those living in that region to the south, but it didn't stop or deter their daily routine one little bit. So it's not like they live in abject fear of that. I mean, no more than if you lived in New York City, that you would live in the fear of being of a home invasion type thing, somebody, or that kind of a break into your home, or riding the subways, which is a way of life. If you're going anywhere, you're going to use those subways, and living in absolute terror of somebody attacking you on the subways. Though you read about it and see it on the news, you just don't live in that fear of it. Neither do they over there. And my guide will tell a story when we're up in the Golan Heights after the victory there, that where we ran Syria out and took the Golan Heights. For the first time, kids were able to play outside. They were raised in bunkers. And so that sort of lifestyle has changed. And the exciting thing is, when you go into the old city of Jerusalem, you're going to get a little aggravated, because you won't be able to walk from this corner of the plaza to that corner of the plaza without tripping over all these little kids playing and screaming and having the time of their life, and they're local kids. And you're going to want to sit down because you're tired, and there's no place to sit, because all the Altacockers that live there, that's the old geezers, that live there, are sitting there in that plaza just enjoying the day. And when you're getting upset, you're watching prophecy being fulfilled before your eyes. Because the prophets declared that a sign of the coming of Messiah is that you'll hear the noise of the children playing in the streets of Jerusalem, and the streets will be filled with the elderly sitting and enjoying the day. And that hadn't been true prior to 1967, actually, in Jerusalem, when we regained Jerusalem. I've got it somewhere, but I can't. Yeah, I hear my wife in my ear right now saying, Google it. But I can find it probably. But it's, you're watching it fulfilled right before your eyes. And that's pretty cool. And the only way to really appreciate and understand that is when you go with me and you see it for yourself. You get a whole different perspective of life in Israel. Then it makes a difference. What else? I have to put a plug for the tour in every chance I get. We were coming out of the old city of Jerusalem and heading to the bus, and we're walking on a narrow walkway. And we have to walk single file because there's soldiers, Israeli soldiers, coming by us. One guy all but hugged and kissed every one of us. Americans, Americans, God bless America. And he was just beside himself because we cared enough to come. When they see us there, and my guide and I have two different ideas of this. My guide will tell you, she'll tell you that you're there so that they can be a blessing to you. I tell you, you're there to be a blessing to them. Because they hear the words, We support you. We're behind you. We love you. We pray for you. It never means nearly as much as when they actually see you there. When they see you there, it has an impact. During the last Intifada, which Ariel Sharon, the secular Jewish man who's the prime minister of Israel, goes to the Temple Mount and as a Jewish man decides to pray. The one time in 10 years he decided to pray, he prays openly as a Jewish man on the Temple Mount, started the Intifadas, the Holy Wars, from 2000, 2001 to 2006. Nobody wanted to go to Israel. I had a tour every year. And it was like having Disney World to yourself. I mean, the sad thing though was every site we went to, we were like the only bus there. So at the end of that, after that was over, we were going to a site called Gennesar. It's Kibbutz Gennesar. It's where there's a boat that was rescued out of the Sea of Galilee that sunk, that dates back to Jesus. Cost the government several fortunes. They don't want anybody finding another boat, but they're glad they have this one. So anyhow, he runs this gift shop. He's a Messianic Jew. He runs this gift shop. It's like one of the best in Israel. So I send my crowd in to go see the boat, and I go and find Alex. And I walked up to him, and he looked at me, and he gave me a big hug, and he smiled, and he said, and there's a refreshment area out there in the foyer part, and he said, sit over here. He said, we'll get something to drink. I'll be right with you. He got us something to drink. We sat down. He said, do you know why I like you so much? No. He said, well, no one else came. You came. We have an impact just by being there. And it's not all about money. It's showing that where we really stand with Israel when we go. And we go to the expense to make the trip, but we take the time out of our lives, and it has an impact on theirs because of that. If I can have 25 or 30, it's a really. I had 28 this year. I've taken as few as 13. Then we have to go through some gymnastics to make that work. Because it's based on 25 to 30, the cost is. So we had to do a lot to make that one work. But, you don't want to go with hundreds of people. Bus only holds 50. The sites don't hold that many. Very few sites where you can get large groups in. And what we're going to show you is like this big. And you've got 150 people between this and you. How are you going to even hear, much less see what we're talking about? And then there's no time to parade 150 people by it. So small group. And then let me tell you this one. Because I get people, they go, really, just 25 or 30? Because they see these guys on television, these evangelical leaders, taking 1,500, 2,000 people. And you don't ever see that guy. You think you're going with this guy. You never see him. How's he going to? They have 24 buses. Literally, one year, one guy had 24 buses. Do you think those 24 buses were ever in the same place at the same time until they got to the hotel? And you never see the guy you think you're going with. And plus, I got to tell you, the little hidden kicker there is, we're trying to see as many sites every day as we can. Every time the bus pulls up in the parking lot, as we go into the site, everybody has to hit the restrooms. Can you imagine you've got 100 people trying to go to the bathroom? How much you're going to see about 3 sites that day because of the bathroom stops. And you can't prevent it. Most of my crowd that goes is over 50. If you're not over 50, you'll learn what that is. You don't sleep at night, you nap in between trips to the bathroom. That's all you do. So it's just that bad on the tour. So 25, 30 people, you're in and out, and you can see more sights. So, There's a practical aspect to all of this stuff that you just can't get away from. What else? Oh, yeah, not cheap. A lot of them, it doesn't matter if they're cheaper or the same price, or you pay more. A lot of these tour companies that you use there employ Palestinian guides and drivers. We had a Palestinian driver one time, and he was not happy with us at all. Uh, but I just couldn't imagine taking a tour like this with the perspective of Israel from a Jewish perspective, and we've got a Palestinian guide. Now, he has to go through the same training that my Israeli guide went through, but you can't train out the mindset and the heart. And it's, I've got a couple preacher friends that we saw them at one site. We were getting off the bus going in. They were getting on their bus leaving. I said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, and I said, "Yeah, but what are you doing on that bus? Why aren't you on my bus? I thought you were my friend." And afterwards they told me, "We should have gone with you because we had a Palestinian guide, and he was as caustic and hateful to both Christians and Jews." And so you don't want that. When I first started doing these tours, when I first connected with Lindy at MTS Travel, I told her I wanted to use Sagle Tours, the land company in Israel. She said, "Well, I only use Net Tours." I said, "I don't know Net Tours, but Sagle are Messianic Jews. It was started by a Jewish believer so that Messianics would have a place to work because they were ostracized. And he built it into the largest tour company in all of Israel. So I want to support that effort." And she said, "Well, let me send you a link to this site." I looked at it, and all I saw was the address, East Jerusalem. And I called her right away. I said, "Hey, I can't use Net Tours. East Jerusalem, Palestinians." And I said, "You understand, I'm a Jewish believer. I'm a Jewish missionary. I'm promoting this tour, Israel from a Jewish perspective. I can't put all these people on a Palestinian bus with a Palestinian driver and guide and give all that money to the Palestinians and undo the whole foundation of my tour. I can't do that." And she said, "Well, as loyal as I was to Sagle, she was that loyal to Net." So she said, "Let me make a call." She called me right back. She said, "I talked to the owner, and with his blessing, I've already called Sagle, and we're all set up." So, I just fully believe that if you're going to Israel, you've got to have that Jewishness, and you're not going to get it from a Palestinian. Yes, he can quote the scriptures. He has to, because he can't get his license and keep his license if he doesn't know those passages. But he can also give you opinion and attitude. You don't need that on the tour. And it really, those two preachers, the only time they ever went to Israel and all they remember about the tour was the attitude of that Palestinian guy and the fight they had every day. You don't want that. That's not what you're going for. So, yes, ma'am. But leave their country and do what? In Israel? Well, if they move to Israel and they're of a certain age and become a citizen, military is not an option. I mean, what I'm saying is it's not an option. You have to join the military. You cannot opt not to if you're within a certain age. For instance, if pastor were Jewish and made aliyah, that's the right of return, and took all these youngins with him to Israel, how many are still yet in high school? 3 or 4. Okay. You get citizenship. All of your children, as soon as they graduate high school, boys and girls, the boys serve 3 years active military. They're in the reserves till they're, well, it used to be 50. Now I hear 45 because the population is growing. The girls serve 2 years active. And active, not desk jobs. Okay? You're going to be out there in the trenches. So there is no option. When you're in high school, you're talking about, 10th, 11th grade, what college you want to go to, what career path you want to follow. In Israel, you're talking about what branch of the military you're looking at going into. So that's why I say for these guys, if they're in that age range, they become citizen, military is required. And you do have, with all of these making aliyah coming into the country. Now, if they're 40 or 50, no. But if they're in their, young 20-something, it's mandatory. And so they coming in, that's just part of the deal if you're going to become a citizen. And the reason for that is there's only 6.2 million Jewish people in Israel. They need all of the bodies. And that's why you're in the reserves till you're 45 or 50. Yeah, because when they were calling them up last summer going into Gaza, and what you hear on the news is, well, now they're calling up, they're up the 35s, and they're talking about age groups of where they're heading. They've called up everybody up to 35. Now they're heading to 40-year-olds. And so at that point, no matter what you do, what's your profession, you drop everything and you report for active duty. Oh, well, then that's possible. I'm not familiar. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that I'm sure that is because of the love and for Israel and for his people, and they welcome that with open arms. Um, what they don't do is they don't recruit like they. Netanyahu one time said was asked something about facing. Um, I don't know if it was Iran. Yeah, it was Iran, and he said, "We're on top of it." He said, "Nobody has more at risk than we do, and we know what the risks are, and we're prepared. And if you look at our history, we've never asked our friends to fight our battles for us. So never have they asked the United States to send troops. Um, they use their own personnel. But if somebody volunteers and moves there and wants to, then they welcome that with open arms." I think we have to stop so we can start again. Okay, let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll begin. Father God, I love you. I thank you for the time this morning and for this week. And I pray that your hand would be upon each and every service, and that, Father, your name would be glorified above all else. I pray that you'll dismiss this hour and meet with us in the following. For it's in Jesus' name we ask it. Amen.